Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on using customer metrics to uncover business opportunities. I'm Maddie Burris from Castora's marketing team, and I'm really excited to be here today on this very cold Friday with Castora's co-founder and CEO, Corey Pearson. So some very quick housekeeping to get out of the way before we start. We host webinars about every 2 weeks. We try to make them for the retail marketing community. We really appreciate your feedback, so we like to make these interactive. So please chat your questions in the GoToWebinar chat window, and we'll get to them at the end. If we don't get to them for any reason, we will follow up via email. And we will be sure to share the deck and the recording as always after the webinar. You should expect it an hour or two after. And I think that's it, and we can jump right in. Let's do it.
All right. Thank you, Maddie. So today we're going to talk about customer KPIs and optimizing the business around customer metrics, a topic that is near and dear to our hearts as big proponents of customer-centric marketing and lifetime value and so on and so forth. We're going to start talking a little bit about the change that's happening in retail. We currently live in a world filled with channels, and we all know because we and every single technology vendor and every single CMO that you've heard at every single keynote for about the past decade has been talking about entering the age of the customer. Today's about what that means when you start thinking about metrics that flow through the organization and how to optimize an organization around those metrics. So we'll talk a little bit about that transition from the age of the channel to the age of the customer. And then we're going to dig right into KPIs. We're going to start by talking about what kinds of KPIs matter. We're going to break that down further and talk about KPIs related to customer acquisition, KPIs related to key strategic customer segments, KPIs related to different stages in the life cycle. And what we hope is that we give you a smattering of different KPIs. Perhaps some of these will resonate, perhaps all of these will resonate, but that we all give it, there's a self-selection thing going on here, and everyone here is interested in this. We're all kind of part of the same tribe promoting optimizing businesses around these customer metrics as we all try to serve our customers better. So with that, some quick background on Castora. For those of you who don't know, we are a software platform. We're a customer intelligence platform. We work with some of the best and biggest names in retail, along with some of the most up and coming digitally native e-commerce brands. And really for us, it's all about customer analytics, customer KPIs, optimizing lifetime value. We sit sort of in a layer that is on top of your raw customer data and below all of your marketing execution tools. We help you make sense and go after these sorts of customer initiatives that we're going to be talking about today in a world that is riddled with channel marketing. So if you like what you see here today, obviously, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to get more concrete and show you how these predictive analytics, these customer KPIs can really drive a difference in your business. With that out of the way, let's talk about the retail. So we live in a channel-centric world, and if you go around the retail organization today, you'll see reports like this. You got Google Analytics is talking about traffic by channel, and you've got brands that are setting their goals around same store sales and revenue goals and the email versus display versus Google versus affiliate. And your organization probably is filled with charts that look, a lot like the stuff on the screen right now, right? You're optimizing last click revenue. You're optimizing web traffic, and all of this stuff makes sense, right? You are thinking about year over year sales in the store. You are thinking about maybe year over year sales of product SKUs. And all of this makes sense. We're not going to get on our high horse and tell you to stop analyzing your web metrics. That would be silly. That would be counterproductive. But the reality is there is more to the business than just what you see in these Omniture reports and these Google Analytics reports. And we all know this, again, echoing the same slides that I was just talking about in the intro. We've heard everyone talk this talk, right? Sometimes we throw this kind of stuff into a sales GP and everyone's kind of like, yeah, I get it. You can move a little faster. We know customers have changed. We know there's more data. We know that customer loyalty is harder. The damn millennials, right? They don't know what it means to have a loyal relationship with the brand, right? But the reality is we do face that as marketers. We need to build these loyal relationships. We know repeat buyers matter. We know lifetime value matters. And it's really hard. And so you kind of have this juxtaposition where you're still living in a channel-centric world, yet you're struggling to keep up with customers. But brands are coming around. So if you look at or listen to earnings reports or read what some of these senior leaders are saying across the industry, you'll hear some differences in the strategic goals that are coming out of leaders in these retailers around the country. You'll hear people saying we're focusing on attracting, engaging, and retaining high-value customers. That is awesome, right? You'll hear people talking about sharpening the focus on a core customer segment, setting goals on customer segments. And that's interesting because you can't find that in Omniture, right? Hey, we're going to sharpen the focus on our core female customer. Really, really difficult to track the KPIs on how well you're doing at connecting with the female customer in a frictionless and painless way. Right? As a retail marketing organization, super easy, if you're not super easy to achieve the gains, but super easy to track how you're doing. If you've got a goal, right? If the earnings report person's out there saying, we're going to try to get a better return on ad spend in Google, and that's going to be the thing that guides us to the promised land, you've got reports at your fingertips. Every day you can check those metrics and see how well you're doing. In order to get the metrics, the KPIs that tell you how well you're doing on attracting, engaging, and retaining high-value customers, how well you're doing at connecting with these core female customers, it takes a lot of work inside of the organization. And that's one of the main reasons why these metrics aren't flowing through the org, right? One of the reasons is it's hard. And another one of the reasons is, hey, what metrics do we focus on? And so fortunately, that's what we're talking about today, because every CMO knows, every C-suite knows that this customer-centric mentality makes sense, right? We know this near and dear in the world of being a startup. Every single investor, when they're thinking about investing, whether it's a B2B startup like us or a retail startup like some of the logos of the companies we work with there, everyone's talking about lifetime value, cost of acquisition. It is the most basic formula for how to build a sustainable, growing brand. You spend money to get customers, you spend money to serve them, and they should spend more money with you, back to you in return. In fact, a completely novel concept, you should earn more profit margin from them than what you spend on them. And when those dynamics work, you get a growing business. And so when you describe it that way, it's pretty simple, but it's really kind of fuzzy and gnarly to figure out how to get an organization moving around it. Right. And so you have these customer-centric goals, you get a layer deeper and you talk about acquisition and retention. You talk about engaging certain customer segments. And what we want to do is drill deeper to make it real and to put stuff in front of the organization so that they can optimize on it. You are what you measure, right? If we don't have the right KPIs, then the organization is not going to align in the right way. So, timeline wise, sometimes if you're sitting here in the org and you're the champion of these customer metrics, right? Sometimes we find this kind of thing is really helpful, right? You can talk about how in the beginning it was all about product for retailers. And then this cool thing called the internet came out and it did a lot of good things for the world. One of them was this massive explosion in the number of digital channels that brands can reach out to customers. And so, for the first 10, 15 years of the 2000s, it was really all about the channel. It was like a land grab. Get your dollars going into every single channel. Get a tool like Omniture in there that helps your business optimize around all those channel metrics. But now we all know we're talking the talk of customer. Of course, in our ambitious vision, we want to be a partner that helps you helps produce these metrics and get them flowing around the org. But even putting us aside, right? It's time for organizations to get on the customer KPI horse. Cool. So let's start with a conversation about which customer KPIs matter. And to do so, we take a little bit of a trip down the customer KPI to rule them all, right? Customer lifetime value. And some of this is obvious to some of you on the phone, but still when I meet with C-suites, it can be really helpful to start with the basics. We still to this day sometimes hear marketing leaders say lifetime value. That's something that Netflix cares about. It doesn't matter to my retail brand. And to that we say, well, hey, think about it. You have some customers who are one and dones, one-time buyers, right? Every retailer knows that, and they know they don't like them. They don't like them as much as the customers who buy three things. the customers who buy 10 things. Obviously, the economics are better. You want loyal customers, right? You want repeat buyers. Lifetime value is the metric that represents the total amount that a customer spends from the first time they make a purchase with you all the way until when, unfortunately, they might churn away and never purchase from you again, right? So some customers buy a lot, some customers buy a little. Lifetime value. It really, really matters in retail. It is very common for us to see a picture like what you're seeing right here, which is that the top 10% of customers can drive half of the revenue for a brand. We've seen concentrations even crazier than this. We've seen brands where the top 10% of customers drive 70, 78%, I think I saw sometime recently, of revenue driven by the top cream of the crop customers. So think about that as a starting point as you think about why do these customer KPIs matter anyway? Yeah, we can analyze the SKUs that we're selling, sure, but aren't we missing something? If 80%, 50%, 60%, whatever, if the majority of our revenue is coming from a sub pocket of users, there's got to be some interesting insights there, right? We want more of those customers. They're the ones who buy the things. So how do we do that? Right? Clearly, that would be a really cool lever. If you could snap your finger and instead of 10% of them, it would be, I had 11% of shoppers like that. That grows your revenue by 5%. It's a big deal. And so there we are on the slide. 10% to 11% is 5% more revenue. Right? So it matters a lot. And that's the impetus for so much of this is brands realizing, hold on a minute, if I'm only looking at channel revenue and if I'm only looking at product SKU year-over-year revenue and same-store sales year-over-year revenue, I'm kind of ignoring this huge economic driver, this huge lever, which is that great customers are the lifeblood of our business. So on top of that, let's also think, so what happens with those customers, right? Let's break down, we acquire those customers. Some customers you acquire, and it's just like a match made in heaven. It's love at first sight. I love relationship analogies with when we're talking about lifetime value. And sometimes you just know, right? Like, it's just great. And it's not like, it almost doesn't matter how the first date goes. There's just so much that's simpatico about you and your new, partner in this relationship that is just gonna work. You can make a couple mistakes, it's just gonna work. Sometimes you just find customers that are just such a good fit for your brand and they're wonderful, right? But a lot of relationships need work and you kind of work at them and you want the second experience, the third experience to be good. And unfortunately, some customers kind of fade away. And if you think about that, like there is a life cycle, there's a relationship life cycle that every brand has with every single customer. And when you put these two things together, right, to kind of set the groundwork for how we're going to think about customer KPIs and which customer KPIs matter, we often like to start with a landscape like this. So you have great customers, your top 5, 10, 20%, and you have customers that are going to be that you're going to acquire and add to your brand. You're going to want to grow certain customers. You're going to want to prevent customers from fading away. So as we think about what KPIs matter, we think about these stages of the relationship. For one, we want more customers with high LTV. Okay, great. That's kind of step one of thinking about this, but how do I get it? Well, let's see. I want to find ways to acquire more high value customers. Let's find more of those matches made in heaven in the beginning, right? I want to find ways to grow the relationships of the folks that are engaged. And I want to find ways to prevent my very best customers from fading down. And this is step one of just thinking about, if I think about the world this way, I don't want 10% of what I call gold VIP awesome customers, the ones that drive 50%. I want 11% of them, right? That's an extra 5% revenue growth. Guarantee you that the C-suite in every single brand that is on the webinar right now would love a 5% boost in revenue. It's probably the most obvious thing that I've said. But okay, so how do we get there? Well, if we're going to think about the world in a very customer focused way, think about these sorts of initiatives. And that's going to be the segue into great. The point of having KPIs is that we're working to analyze and optimize for the right metrics. You want a KPI to sort of represent your progress towards an initiative that's going to drive a lot of value. So if we say, look, we want to allocate more dollars to acquire high value customers, you better have some KPIs so you can track progress against that. If you say we want to try to drive frequency with this group that is like engaged but not quite in that top 10% bucket, then you need some KPIs to track that. You talk about churn, right? Life cycle stages, you need the KPIs. And so that's sort of the backdrop here of the way that we think about it. And when we work with brands, the way that we, before we get into what the KPIs are, we just talk about the lay of the land here and the goal of turning that 10% into 11%, then thinking about the levers and the initiatives, and then thinking about the KPIs that make sense to do so. Cool. All right. So let's break down what some of those KPIs are. When we talk about customer acquisition, we're talking about finding the matches made in heaven. We're talking about where do we acquire the customers who love us, right? And there's a number of different ways you can do so. But first, just to kind of paint an analogy of why this matters, I like to go back to the case study of Groupon. Right? Groupon at a certain point, it's like a fundamental flaw with channel metrics instead of customer metrics, right? Like Groupon was like an affiliate partner that drove a ton of revenue, right? You come up with that deal and it's 80% off your first purchase at, my widget store XYZ, and oh my God, you'd get so many. And it was great, and it was a big boost of revenue. But the problem is, with the 80% off, you kind of lost profit margin on all those orders. And the other problem was those customers never came back. They liked you when you were 80% off. They don't really like you when you're full price. And that poses a problem, right? You're really losing money with those campaigns, hence the challenges that a lot of companies in that deal of the day model had. But from a channel metric point of view, hey, we actually got a lot of visits. We got a lot of, revenue. Sure, it was discounted steeply, but we got a lot of revenue that day. It looked good. But if you were looking at the LTV, the lifetime value of those customers, you would have seen it's really, really bad, right? And compare that to maybe another affiliate partner. I'm like a technical widget XYZ, and I got this cool write-up on a techie website, and like all the traffic that came from there, like they were our kind of people. And so maybe you do owe like an affiliate commission link to the folks who pushed you that traffic, but damn, all those people turn into repeat buyers. Maybe the revenue you got that day wasn't as much as you got from the Groupon day, but over the course of a year, it was 10 times more revenue because all those customers repeated, and they repeated at full margin, right? So we can use the analogy of fishing in the right pond. You want to acquire customers that are the right fit for your brand. And so if you think about translating that into KPIs, there's a couple on the screen right now. This is a dashboard that every single brand should be looking at, but very few of them actually are. Because again, it can't exist in your Omniture, in your Google Analytics, because it has longitudinal customer metrics involved, like customer lifetime value. So here we are. You guys might recognize on the left, source, medium, whatever your core metrics, your Omniture, Google calls it. There's a digital channel, right, that is tagged on users. You know when a user makes a first purchase. Well, again, your web analytics platform might not, but you do, right? In your order database, or if you use a customer analytics partner, you're going to know which orders were new customer orders and which ones were repeat orders. So we're talking about acquisition. So how many customers made their very first order from these channels? And these are very high level. Imagine you could double click into each of these things. Into organic, you could find different search engine keywords. Into email, it means you were able to capture their email and you were sending them emails that were driving the first purchase, right? So, a lot of you have email lists for members that don't really turn into buyers, but you use the email as an avenue to do it. You got paid affiliates, you've got cost per click, you've got social, you got display. There's all kinds of different things here and you can get granular within each of them. But okay, so look at the following KPIs now. If you're an acquisition team, first things first, sure, look at the number of customers. Hey, that Groupon example, you did acquire a ton of customers, and that is a metric that matters, right? What is the volume of customers you acquired? But then what's the lifetime value of those customers? Okay, so few things with lifetime value. Lifetime value is tossed around and it means so many things. First of all, it has too many acronyms. It's CLV, it's LTV. I mean, we all as an industry should come around and use one. But second of all, what's the time horizon that matters for your brand? Very, very rarely do we see an organization that legitimately optimizes for forever lifetime value. Far more common, based on your cash flow, you care about the 1 year value of the customers you're acquiring, or the 2 year value, or maybe the 3 year value. It all kind of sloppily gets grouped into lifetime value just to kind of represent long-term value. But let's just assume for the purposes of this conversation that when we say customer lifetime value, we mean the 2 year value from purchase number one of the new customers coming in, right? And you can see this kind of variance is very, very common. at the top end here, you're acquiring some customers that are spending $200 with your brand over the first year, the first 2 years of the relationship. And from other channels, it's down to 150. But think about it. That's a 25% difference in customer value. That's a really, really big deal. And so if you multiply together, how many customers am I acquiring from the channel? And what is the lifetime value or the 2-year value or the one? I'm going to go back to 1-year value. All of us think better in like this year terms. So how many new customers did I acquire? And what are they going to spend over their first year? Just multiply those together. And it's the projected revenue that you picked up as a brand from that channel this month, right? So if you have a budget that is geared towards customer acquisition and you're thinking about the ROI, not just in the moment, but over the course of the year, then that multiplication thing, matters a lot. Right, so I acquired 2,000 at 190, and you multiply them together, and then you're in good shape. Right now, you know the kind of total sum of, maybe call it equity, that you earn, customer equity added from your acquisition campaigns there. Now, a couple of more points on lifetime value. So there's a couple ways you can do this as a brand. Now, you might be asking, hey, I just acquired these customers like last week. I don't know what the hell they're going to spend over the first year. And it's a very, very good point. You might follow that up by saying also, what are you telling me? I got to wait a year and then figure out what the lifetime value is. I'm just going to go tell my manager, manager, don't worry. I'm going to have your results of your LTV. Just hang out for a year, and then we'll tweak the dials and we'll figure out how to optimize a marketing campaign, to which you will probably be told to either, do something faster or don't come back to work. Like, nobody can wait for a year. No marketing organizations have that amount of time to wait. So you have two choices. Number one, you can go back in the past, right? You can kind of proxy the lifetime value by look at the cohort of customers you acquired 12 months ago. You actually have that data, right? How much did they spend over their first 12 months? You might hear folks talk about cohort analysis, right? So you can go back in time and figure out, hey, look, at least the ones we acquired 12 months ago, they spent $190. And so I'm just going to assume it's the same lifetime value right now. That's a decent start, but you can also use predictive analytics to predict the lifetime value of newer customers. So if your business is rapidly changing, or if the competitive landscape is rapidly changing, right, then the predictive things matter a lot, because they're going to key in on a lot more signals. And without getting into too many details, I think we have a separate webinar that was probably online. You can really dig into techniques of predicting and calculating LTV. But suffice to say that the latest and greatest advancements with probabilistic modeling and machine learning, or fancy math, artificial intelligence, insert your own buzzword, you can actually do a pretty good job of predicting the LTV of even new cohorts. And so a dashboard like this and the subsequent drill downs by team, right? When you have your CPC team that's looking at keyword groups and looking at the LTV, by keyword, and you have affiliates looking down by affiliate partners and social by social campaigns, you can get really granular to figure out where are we acquiring those customers that are worth $200, not $150. And by allocating more dollars in there, it really pays off over the course of a year. But the KPIs here, again, customer volume, 1-year value, getting to the level of granularity that matches the decision making, right? So the director of marketing might care about high level, how much money are we investing in these channels, and comparing that with what we have listed here as projected revenue. And then the channel managers are going to care about the different campaigns themselves so they can optimize within. So customer acquisition, volume of customers combined with the LTV can really take the acquisition to anchor those efforts. That's the whole point of these KPIs, and to track progress, right? As you improve and put more money into the CPC campaigns that are attracting higher value customers, you go back to this dashboard, and over time, instead of it being 156, it moves up to 160, it moves up to 165. That's the point of the KPIs, right? We got to see improvement over time. Sweet. So moving along, right? Then, on that landscape, I also highlighted, how about those engaged users? And we really want to drive more, right? We want to turn those folks who are maybe in the 10 to 20% range. We want to get them into the top 10. So how do I do that? And so one thing we've seen a huge uptick in recently is segment level KPIs, customer KPIs on the segment level, when you have a core segment you're going after. And the quote we showed earlier, they were talking about our core shopper and driving growth. And maybe it's your loyalty program, it's your millennial segment, or maybe it's just the folks that are in your 10 to 20% tier, call it your silver tier, or you're trying to turn them into gold tier customers. Cool. So let's break down again with a customer lens. how much money do we get from a segment? Like, we know there's some revenue that comes in, but let's get a little deeper. Well, hey, you know what? There's a certain number of customers in that segment that are making orders, and there's a certain amount of money that comes from the customers who make the orders. Hey, take it deeper. You know what? Revenue per customer is a function of how often did they visit and check out, and what did they spend each checkout. And you know what? When they check something out, there's items in the cart, and each of those items has a price. Well, this gets interesting, right? Because what you can do is you can look at any segment in your database and you can pull some numbers, right? So let's say we're looking into millennials. Maybe the revenue's down on millennials year over year. But you know what? There's actually more of them buying this year. Interesting. But the revenue per user is down. How come? Well, they're actually ordering a little bit more per year than they used to, but they're spending less. Interesting. They're spending less. Oh, you know what? It's not that the items they're buying are cheaper. It's that they're putting less things in their basket, right? And this is illustrative, but you can see, like, if all you're looking at is the top here, my revenue is down 3%. What are you going to do to fix that? Well, I don't know. Maybe I got to get more of them to order. Well, yeah, but you're already doing a good job there. Oh, well, maybe I got them to come more frequently. You actually, whatever you did to try to drive more traffic to the site or drive into the store is kind of working, right? What did our promotions like work? Like, you know what? They're actually spending more per item. So, what would be causing them to put less items in the basket? You know what? Maybe the assortment we picked this year actually isn't resonating with the millennial segment. Whereas last year, maybe, we had the right assortment of millennial jeans and sneakers and shirts, and this year, maybe we made a mistake in our product line. And that's what's driving the items per order. Or maybe we were like hardcore on that, like get $150 in the cart and you get a discount. And that was a thing we used last year, and we took that away. The point here is when you break down the KPIs of a segment like this, you get a whole lot more information on what the hell's happening in that segment. And what it leads to is really interesting KPI and goal setting going forward, right? Because now, where are we going to focus? What might we do? There's a lot of cool things we could do here, right? So as I just said, hey, the items per order might be the tactic that we want to focus on here. But like, maybe if you drew that little driver tree up, call it the tree of customer, tree of lifetime value. There it is. I just named it. If you draw that tree up for different customer segments, like the things that you might do in each bucket, the great thing about this is it's associated with different tactics, right? So we said the thing with the items per order, you might have certain promotional tactics, hit the 150 threshold, and you get a certain amount off. That might encourage more items in the basket. If it's about driving people to the store, maybe there's some incentives around that. Maybe there's some like VIP programs. You might be an on-the-channel brand, and you get your friends and family things going on along with the e-com marketing. If it's about the price in the basket, the AUR, average unit revenue, well, there's a couple things you can do there. Number one, you're going to talk to your finance team about the promotional strategy, right? Because we're all working together on this thing. But number two, maybe you could do some segmentation and find out within this group, there are some customers that actually prefer the real high price millennial shoes, and there are other customers who prefer the low price millennial shoes, and you can start segmenting better. But the point here is, like, knowing which thing is actually impacting your gains or your losses, and knowing which of these variables you think you're going to have the most control over. You set goals, right? And again, the whole point of these KPIs, you can do something with them. You can measure progress against them. So you start opportunity sizing. Look, if I could increase my items per order by a little bit, if I could increase the items, the unit price just a little bit, if I could increase the number of customers coming a little bit, you do a little sensitivity analysis, and you figure out, hey, that would lead to a $10 million bump in revenue. That would lead to a $5 million bump in revenue. And you pick the KPIs that matter, and then you track against them. So we've got partners that we work with that have pegged super critical segments. And I use millennial only because it's the most overused trade example, but actually we have a lot of companies who do it because millennials matter. But where they have decided that maybe it is orders per year, visits per year for the millennial, and that is a KPI that is C-level visibility. And they did a tree like this, and they figured out that was this point of sensitivity, that if they could raise that from 2.2 to 2.4, that was the thing that they felt they had the most control over, and that they would be working on throughout the year. Now, how do you work on it? It isn't just email marketing. It isn't just Facebook marketing. It's a combination of things that you're going to do in the marketing department and the product design. The whole point of these metrics is you're getting the organization aligned around this stuff. But you put all that stuff together, and the organization rallies around it, and it's C-level, board level visibility for the way that the company's tracking their progress. Cool. All right. So we talked about acquisition KPIs. We talked about the tree of lifetime value and the segment level KPIs. The next thing I'm going to go into are things around life cycle KPIs. And this is similar to segment KPIs, but it's a little bit different. And I think it's when brands really embrace this thinking about driving LTV, achieving growth by getting their customers to buy more, they tend to embrace this concept of the relationship life cycle. And in addition to thinking of things like we just spoke about, finding the right customers and setting the right segment level KPI goals, they also track as if it's a funnel, similar to a conversion funnel. It's like the relationship funnel. I was going to say funnel of love, like tunnel of love, but it's like a little too cheesy, but then I did say it out loud anyway. Anyway, there's a relationship funnel here of customers who go from the one-time buyer to the repeat buyer and onward. And you don't want them to fall out into the churn cycle there. And so really interesting KPIs you can set to see how is your organization doing at different life cycle stages. Okay, so first things first, a lot of you probably have some distribution of a dashboard that looks something like this. This is an example of a brand. Members, we got them to sign up for email, but they haven't bought yet, right? Then within your buyers, you have some who are active and some who are inactive. I hope you're all looking at this. Most brands are. Now, how you determine active, inactive, again, there's a very interesting conversation to have there. Many brands, and most commonly, will refer to something like a 12-month rule or a 24-month rule. You're active if you've engaged recently. That's a start. You can do better, right? Sometimes your very best customers, a lot of this talk is about how do you get that top 10% super engaged. A lot of those folks buy maybe weekly or monthly. You don't really want to wait 12 months before you call them inactive. So there's a different version of this that leverages predictive analytics that might say on cycle and off cycle of customers who are kind of in their groove the way they usually order and those who have fallen out of their specific tendency. But at the same time, even the brands we work with who do on cycle and off cycle still do active inactive this way, just because it's part of just the fabric of reporting in the org. And like we kind of learned the hard way when we were a young and up and coming company, when we tried to force people to not use their 12-month rule, and we kind of got like, yeah, I get what you're saying about on cycle, off cycle, but also show us our 12-month active inactive. Do both. It's all good. The motivation's in the right place, and you're looking at who's engaged and who isn't. But that in and of itself, I don't know. Most brands we talk to, they look at that stuff, but it isn't necessarily the most actionable, right? And so you can get a little bit deeper, right? So let's talk about one of the things that happens is people break up with their brands, right? They churn. And maybe today, every kind of 10 customers who are thinking about breaking up with you, maybe you're saving one of them. But what would happen if you could save two of them instead, right? This is where we're talking about the funnel again. Every brand this happens, the customers fade away, right? Like every brand in the history of all mankind ever has had customers who churn. And so what would happen here? Like there's a stage, customers enter the danger zone, and you want to know how well is your business doing at saving those customers. You remember the opportunity landscape. We've had examples, I use that example of top 10% of customers drive half the revenue. For one brand we worked with, literally half of those customers were churning out every year. So think about that. Like 25% of the revenue was cycling out. I should say churning down, right? Some of them turned from the top 10% down to like, middle of the road customers. And some of them completely left the brand. But still, they were losing 10, 15, 20% of their revenue every year from customers who are slipping away. It's not healthy. It's really hard to grow a brand that way. And so you start looking at, well, how well are we doing at saving customers? Really, you start at the beginning, which we'll talk about later. You don't want customers to get into the uh-oh zone. But if they do, how are you saving them? Well, you can come up with a KPI for that. Hey, of customers who are in trouble, how many do we save, right? And so whether you have the internal analytics that are doing this, right, where you have like the internal CRM team that's sort of calculating, and somehow they calculate what's in the danger zone and how many do we save before and at the end of each month, or you use a partner like us. These are obviously little screenshot snippets from Kastora. You can have a metric. We very cleverly named it the churn prevention rate, because then we can make cheesy jokes about CPR, Because you're saving the customers. It's so good. You know you like it, right? So it's CPR. So what is your CPR? 7%. 7% of those customers you save. Well, that's cool. So then what happens if you improve that, right? We're saying here, hey, this is a $500,000 opportunity for this brand. And that comes from doing some throughput analysis, some scenario planning. Well, great, you're saving 7% right now. What happens if you get a relative 5 or 10 or 15% difference? We know how many customers enter the danger zone each month. We know how much those customers spend per order. We can multiply them together and say, look, if you can get an improvement to this rate, here's the amount of incremental value it will create for you on a monthly basis and on an annual basis. And this is conservative. This isn't even factoring in the case that when you save these customers, you hope that they kind of resume their usual purchase ways and start buying again and again after this CPR campaign, right? And so the point here, though, is great. So I've not only pegged it, I'm not only picking a KPI here, right? I'm not only looking at, hey, 7% right now, and we're going to try to set a goal on this to get this to 7.8, let's say, 10% improvement. I understand what the monetary value is of doing so. That makes these KPIs so much more meaningful to the organization. So now you can start running, again, a variety of different campaigns, a variety of different tactics. They're going to roll up. But what you want to see is that this rate year over year is getting better, because if it is, you know how much value it's going to drive for the brand. Now, you could do this not just for the CPR, for the churn prevention rate, but for the 1 to 2 time buyer conversion, right? Think about the first stages of the customer relationship. Hey, we know we're acquiring a certain amount of customers each month, right? You have that graph somewhere in your org. New customers acquired by month, right? New customers who made their first purchase, grouped by the month where they made that first purchase. Sweet. Well, how many of them are we converting? We have this metric we call the early repeat rate, and there's no clever like the CPR thing here. But the early repeat rate, what we know is, look, you have one-time buyers. Some of them convert into repeat, and of those, some of them convert right away, and some of them don't convert for a long time. But again, marketers can't wait a really, really long time to figure out, am I doing a better job of converting one-time buyers? So as a leading indicator, we look at new buyers and how many converted within their first, say, 60 days, 90 days. Right. And the point there isn't to say that that's the total number of 1 to 2 time buyer conversion. It's just to say, as marketers, we got to kind of operate a little faster with more real-time feedback. So it almost doesn't matter. Even if your average interpurchase time is like 90 days and you pick it at 60 days, it's a leading indicator, and it is always directionally in line with your ultimate one-time buyer rate. But you do the same analysis here. Given the number of customers I'm acquiring each month, and given what the conversion rate is, you scenario plan with these KPIs. Now, the interesting thing to call out here is that number is a $55,000 opportunity. We're talking about a fairly small brand here, but $55,000 opportunity, whereas the churn thing was a $500,000 opportunity. We did that intentionally to show you that, again, some of the value of these KPIs and having them and doing this upsizing is I know where to prioritize my time. Because I'll tell you, it's hard to improve the early repeat rate. You are making a mistake if you think that your email marketer alone is going to be able to improve your one-time buyer conversion rate. I guarantee you will be frustrated in 12 months, right? It is a cross-functional job. It is hard. And for a lot of brands, it can make a huge, huge difference. But in this example, there's actually a lot more bang for your buck getting really smart in the churn, in the uh-oh moment. And so thinking about these KPIs and doing the scenario planning, it not only serves as a way to align the organization and kind of track progress, but it also helps with the prioritization. And one of the big challenges that brands have today in this new age of the customer, and there's so many different ways you can slice and dice the data, is what the hell should we be focusing on? And so this sort of scenario planning around these KPIs is really, really helpful for that. So if you do this for the early repeat rate, and you do this for the CPR, right? You do this for your win back rate, et cetera, et cetera. You do it all across the life cycle, and you come up with a pretty sweet looking dashboard where you've got all of the different life cycle stages spec'd out and how much money you might earn. So here's another example, again, sample store we call Big Store. Big Store is our favorite demo store, but every single column here is a stage in the life cycle. How well are we converting those members on our email list into buyers? How well are we converting one-time buyers? How well are we driving engagement in the repeat buyers? How well are we saving customers who fade away, or maybe reviving those, reactivating those who are long gone? Where should I spend my time? Super valuable C-suite dashboard here that's going to orient the org around which initiatives matter, and then provide some feedback into the variety of activities that you're going to work on, and kind of have some metrics to roll them up. So if we summarize that, and then we'll get to some questions, because I know some questions have been coming in. But if we summarize that, right, I'm going to go back to the landscape that we showed, right? We kind of started here by saying, look, you have high value customers. Actually, I'm going to go back even here. You've got great customers. Top 10% are driving half of your revenue. And holy shit, holy shit, if you could get 1% more of those great gold customers, it would be a 5% revenue growth. That's big. That's the reason we're getting all customer centric, right? It's the reason why these KPIs matter. We know that there's a journey that these customers go on. We know there's initiatives we're going to launch to try to change that mix of customers, right? So let's come up with KPIs to track our progress on that. We want to go after that 5% revenue bump. We want to leverage customer KPIs. It's not just about having a pulse on the health of the file. It's about driving growth, right? So we had KPIs on the acquisition side where we looked at the volume of customers combined with their 1-year value. And the multiplication of those two, total value acquired in the channel, is super important, because as you put more dollars in the channels that matter, you might acquire fewer customers. Your customer acquisition count might go down, but because the LTV number is going up, the total sum that you acquire in each channel ends up bigger, right? We talked about setting goals on your existing customer segments, driving more frequency, or driving more items in the basket, or driving more AOV, items per, driving more on the unit cost price, and scenario planning to figure out which of those KPIs will drive the most growth for your business, and then tracking them, right? And then we talked about churn, and we talked about just life cycle funnel, the funnel of love, right? All of the journey that customers go through as they convert into the different stages and they walk up that loyalty ladder, and how you can use those KPIs to size up emphasis on life cycle stage, relationship life cycle stage, to drive a lot of growth in the business as well. So just an entree into customer analytics or customer KPIs, I mean to say. And so hopefully you found some of that interesting. We're going to shift to some questions now. I'm going to get to the final stage here. So first question that came from someone in the audience that was asking, well, great, across all of these KPIs, generally speaking, which ones move the needle the most? I'll say this, because every brand is unique, and so it's a little bit, it's a great question, but it's a tough question. I'll say what I can say is, if you are a brand that is not entirely saturated already, meaning some brands that just like Walmart, we don't work with Walmart, but pretty much every single person in the country's already bought with Walmart, which is not, I'm sure they still care about customer acquisition, but they're not going to care as much about customer acquisition as like an upstart brand, or a brand that's even a well-established brand that's trying to acquire new customers, because the kind of customer acquisition just happens to Walmart. So if you're not in that situation, then there's a lot you can do with customer acquisition. Like there's a school of thought, which is that, yes, of course we should try to nurture every customer we acquire, and of course we should save these relationships before they run out, but when they're fading away. But finding great customers in the first place is a great way to grow your overall customer mix, right? So when you scenario play the model of like, hey, if I were to get a 10% bump in the LTV of the customers I acquire, and you look at like the percentage of revenue from new customers versus repeat customers, and you kind of stack those cohorts up, in many cases that offers the most bang for the buck. Not in all. But then if you think about all the other metrics, I would say, there's, if we think of the segment tree of like, is it easier to get more customers buying, or is it easier to drive frequency or drive up AOV? It actually changes with every brand we work to, because some people are under the constraints of finance that is just like, no matter what, we have to increase our promotions this year. And we all know it sucks. None of us want to do it, but we're going to go out of business if we don't, right? There's a little prisoner's dilemma thing happening now with promotions. And again, we can talk a whole topic on how to wean off of that. But, so sometimes you just can't do it. And as a result, that one's off the table, but like across the rest of that tree, I think there's quite a bit of stuff that you can do. So, and then in terms of the life cycle, I would say that The thing that is in the purview of most marketing teams, CRM teams, to take control of in and of themselves is more churn prevention than one-time buyer conversion. And the reason is with churn prevention, you know a lot about your customers. They were loving you, right? They were engaging a lot, and it was awesome. You had glorious times together. And then for some reason, they're fading away. But it turns out that the right marketing message in a situation like that, even acknowledging sometimes, like not waiting 12 months for your weekly buyer to be like, hey, Maddie, like, I know you used to buy here a lot. Like, what's up? We've had examples. Some of our partners, I think Eloquy has a really cool case study where they wrote handwritten letters. They actually picked up the phone for some of their high value customers and did the economics on it, and it worked, right? It actually drove more value, even with the cost and how expensive it is to pick up the phone and call. Like the brand connection that a buyer who's already bought from you 10 times feels when they see that level of recognition, you can actually move the needle on some of those metrics in a pretty significant way. Now, on the other hand, one-time buyer conversion, it can offer an even bigger gain in many cases, but your email marketing manager is not going to fix it alone. There's no such thing as a welcome series email or a magic trigger that happens. Most one-time buyers convert after 46 days, so I'm going to send them an email after 45 with a discount. Never actually moves the needle, right? The real way to move the needle with a one-time buyer is to do some pretty deep analysis on, based on what customers come and buy in first, what else might they buy? When do they buy it? How do they buy it? How do we educate different types of customers? How do we leverage predictive analytics on that first purchase when data is so sparse to kind of guide people down the right track of introducing to the brand? Which products are causing people to buy repeat buys, which products aren't, which demographic groups? It's really a cross-functional thing, and it can drive wild improvements when you get a whole team working on it together, but you need to get more people working, generally speaking, for the one-time buyer one. All right, another question that came in here. How does my data need to be organized in order to do this? Okay, so great. In fact, so we talk about the age of the customer. We talk about all this customer analytics, and it all has to sit on a bedrock, on a foundation of having your customer data in one place, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Some of you have already invested a ton of money in the guys like the Axioms, the Experians, et cetera, kind of the last generation, if you want to call it that, of data warehouses, customer data warehouses. And that's great. You spend a lot of money, talk to us so we can help you, use it, get these metrics flowing. But nonetheless, you've done step one, right? You've got a lot of your data together. Some of you haven't. You got a POS system, you got an e-com system, you got a separate email system. There's a few different things you can do. A company like Castora can help, right? We do some data stitching, but there's a whole crop of brands that actually major in that, right? Like their whole jam is to unify data together and identity resolution and figuring out that, hey, Corey Pearson in my POS system is actually the same Corey Pearson, even though it's spelled differently in the e-com system, or the address changes and how do we resolve it? There's a whole industry on people who do that really, really well that we often sit on top of, right? So, but the basic premise, you got to get your data together, is true. We've worked with brands who had a little bit of their data together. You still get in, and it's still better to start seeing the world this way. And then as the data gets cleaner and more unified, that's great. But if you're sitting here and you're thinking about your whole stack, think, right, like kind of, I would say best of breed right now, depending on how messy your data is. If your data's not that messy, then great. But if you're like an on-the-channel brand that's been around for years and all kinds of legacy systems, there's something on the bottom. Best of breed, I'd say, is not necessarily, no offense to our friends over at Experian and Axiom, but the best of breed, like new age of technology that's doing data unification stuff. There's a lot of really cool providers there. And so, there's a group there. We could talk more about that. Then a company like us, or that kind of focuses on the intelligence, and then a really good best of breed marketing stack. Great email tool, great social tool, et cetera. That's kind of the way that we see people organizing, at least the most sophisticated brands, the ones that are achieving the most growth. The key thing of all is that you know who your users are, right? You got to have that golden user ID. So another question came in. It says, can Castora benchmark us against other retailers? Why, yes. So benchmarks are awesome. We actually have a module of our product that's in beta right now that we're going to be rolling out to more of our customers. So customers who are on the line, ask us about it. that's really all around getting into a whole lot of benchmarks. And so you can benchmark all kinds of things, right? Benchmarking how I'm doing with my churn prevention rate, my CPR, my one-time buyer conversion rate against my peers, or looking at the year-over-year growth numbers that we showed in that lifetime value tree, right? The orders per user and the visits per year and how those things are trending against, peers. There's a lot of different things you can do to benchmark, and we find that benchmarks really help. Like sometimes, like the industry, like promotions are a great example, right? You're promoting, you might be promoting a little bit more, but it can be really helpful to say, hey, sure, we're promoting a lot, maybe a little more than last year, but to know that everybody else is promoting a little bit more than maybe some of our promotions, like our promotion weaning activities, are starting to make a difference. That kind of stuff. That kind of stuff can go a long way. And so yeah, I think pretty much any one of these KPIs, the next wave, and something that our customers asked us a lot for was, can you start benchmarking against sort of retail at large, and even better if you can get down into my vertical of retail, apparel, let's say, then all the merrier. Oh, it is a good one. Another question came in that talks about some of these KPIs and the tension between channel KPIs, particularly ROAS, they say, and things like CLV. Yeah. So I think something that we as CRM focused and customer analytic focused marketers, a mistake that we sometimes make is we get a little too strong on the high horse of the theoretical benefit of lifetime value. And lifetime value is huge and it's awesome and you need it to live. But you know what? There's also this thing called the short-term need, long-term, short-term. And you do need revenue and you need it right now. So for all the crap I was giving Groupon for acquiring all those like 20%, 80% off, 80% off, purchases, right? For every conversation you have about the importance of LTV, you might have a CMO that says, yeah, that's all good and great, but if I don't hit my revenue numbers right now, this quarter, this week, I'm going to be fired. That sounds extreme, but you all know it's not, because there's so much turnover. Marketers' jobs are so hard. Unfairly so, for the record, right? It's not the marketer's fault that you have a one-time buyer problem. It's a whole company problem. It's a whole company challenge. But often is the case that the CMO is kind of, put on the chopping block there. And so there is a tension, right? It's kind of one of the things that we learned is you can't just say, look, we're only looking at customer KPIs and we're gonna throw Omniture out. Like, no, you can't. You do have to look. You are allocating dollars into channel tools. You still need to look at your return on ad spend. Be careful. Don't double count your dollars. Maybe start looking at things like margin, not just revenue. Maybe recognize that your retargeting display ads might be taking credit for some of the work you did with other, there's a lot of things here. You're probably working with some multi-touch attribution vendors to help with that. Cool, right? Be smart about it, but don't get rid of it. You still have to make a choice. Should I keep advertising on this channel? So the channel stuff does matter. And really the appetite for how much you can start tilting the balance short, long term is something that's not unique just for retail. Again, B2B companies face it. Hey, I could invest a whole bunch of sales and really try to jack up these short-term revenue numbers right now. Or I could try to, invest in some R&D and a better product, and the growth's going to, I'll get more energy in R&D this year, which might lead to more growth next year. Well, that's like kind of a board level decision. There is no necessarily right or wrong. Maybe you need those short-term numbers, otherwise you won't be able to, reach the next milestone and raise the next round of capital even. There's so many factors for any type of company and any type of vertical with this. But I think the important thing is, if there's a lot of short-term revenue feelings, to have KPIs and have scenario planning, to have numbers on how the CLV stuff will impact your business over the next couple of years, enables you as a C-suite to have that conversation and to strike the right balance, right? So it might be that all of your energy right now is just in the short-term revenue, but you can show how crappy the churn rate is, and you can show the leaky bucket and how this is going to lead to an unsustainable business long-term, and show the need to improve LTV. Now, that might not say, okay, scrap all of our short-term channel metrics because maybe you'll be out of business in a quarter, but you might have to start allocating some percentage of mind share to this sort of stuff. That's how we see this stuff play out. On the other hand, and it happens a whole lot more with private companies and VC-backed companies, they're already thinking about this, or they have the luxury. They don't have quarterly reports to the street where they can actually afford, hey, we're going to kind of change some of our budget allocation here and position us in a position that wins for the long term. Sweet. It's usually the public companies that actually face a whole lot more attention on that. But a great question, and one that we've had to grapple with quite a bit. All right, cool. That is all the questions that are in right now. So thank you guys again for joining today. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, please don't hesitate to reach out to the team here at Kastura. I'm Corey, Corey at Kastura.com. Maddie, her email address on the screen as well. If you're interested in ramping up customer KPIs in your organization, you think your team is ready to start optimizing on these goals, think of us as a partner to really accelerate your path to get there. We'd love to work with you to share the success stories of the brands that we've worked with, and we'd welcome the conversation. So with that, enjoy your Super Bowl. Feel sorry that the Eagles aren't in it this year, but they'll be back next year.